Hello, I'm Professor Kate Bird, and I'm here speaking to Dr. Nompilo Ndlovu, who is an oral historian and gender expert who works across the continent of Africa. Now, Nompilo, I'd like to ask you, hi, I'd like to ask you, Nompilo, why is taking an intersectional feminist approach to your work important to you?
It's the first port of call. It's just a foundation in any kind of work because it's always taking into account different diverse realities and identities submerged under especially the category woman. So you always want to work with the fact that intersectionality is contextual, the contexts are different, it's inclusive, and that it has to be transformative. So it's always important to work from a place where you're just incorporating that diversity aspect and making sure that that conversation or that title doesn't limit it to a few people.
Great, thank you. And what does it mean in a practical sense in terms of the kinds of conversations you have with women and men in communities across Africa?
That's an interesting one. All right. Generally, using the term intersectional feminism is a loaded term, right? So normally if you practice it out, I'll give an example of a workshop, then you can kind of see how even that wording doesn't become quite so aggressive, especially to people who are not gender specialists or who haven't studied gender. So normally, practically, if I was to start a meeting or I'm convening or I'm facilitating a group, then I'd always usually say to them, I'm actually going to take an intersectional feminist approach here. And I do that deliberately, not because I'm trying to throw out theories, but I'm trying to get everyone in the room, all levels across in a developmental space, comfortable with words which in Africa have typically been associated with either elite terms, or at least they've been associated with the LGBTQ community or something else, and just words especially that people tend to associate with aggressive women or aggressive version of gender studies. So how it could practically play out would be that once I've said, okay, I'm going to take an intersectional feminist approach to actually running or facilitating this group. Practically, that means that we are all going to co-create ideas today, right? That's basically what it means. We're all going to learn from each other and we're all going to try to understand each other's realities. So in order to start off this day, you're going to crush all existing norms that you guys know of, because if we work from that place, then we're always working from a place of power and hierarchy. Because actually, whether it's in women's spaces or any other spaces, hierarchies exist. They tend to exist. Your more educated person would feel like they should have the hierarchy. A married woman has a higher hierarchy than a single mom, and stuff like that. So when you say that you're doing intersectional feminism, you're actually asking everyone in the room to decant themselves and almost learn again together, a way of co-creation without any other foundation prior to that. So anyone that has titles in the room, if you're a doctor, if you're whatever, you all have to shed that down. And it basically just kind of gets development thinking creatively to a place where we are not also always following the same old ideas, but all of a sudden we are understanding that we are co-creators or not recipients of development ideas, but that in a space, because everyone in the space can be feminist, male or female, and everything else across the gender spectrum. They can have a feminist lens, but it just does go to show that the ideas are from us, and actually they represent everyone here in a different way. And so generally you find that it helps to start with a conference like that, for example, because then it's non-linear. There isn't a clear structure to say this person is the big person in the room. It's also very focused on justice. It's focused on equality. It's focused on making sure that there is no one who is voiceless or who isn't represented. Is that practical enough?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I was wondering also if you could give maybe a concrete example of the kind of changes you're hoping to bring around through your work.
Okay. I think I've already touched on quite a few as I was speaking. My worry generally when we speak about feminism and more gender and just gender specifically is that where the African context is concerned, we've run out of ideas. Well, we haven't, but the world has run out of ideas of what developmental ideas are. So you often find, well, especially in Zim where I come from, that people are like HIV and AIDS, disability, rural woman, poverty, LGBTQ, none of these issues are not important. I don't want to be misunderstood. They're all very important. But I just my thing is that the one thing that I want to be changed, and I'm still trying to figure out practically what it is one, venture into the unknown, like outside of what has been said, as what is the next feminist approach, as what is the gendered lens. Is there anything that we are not seeing outside of like wage equality and stuff like that? What should we be thinking about? So I'm always trying to venture into the newer domain. And it's always a process because you never know it in advance. You kind of stumble into it. But I'm always keenly looking out for and hearing amongst the snippets of things that communities say, if that is the next best thing that we should be focusing on, so that we run away from, as women and as developmentalists, regurgitating the same ideas and topics. So yeah, one of the practical things, venture into newer domains. The second one is the use of the creative arts. I know a lot of people have tried to do this when they talk about intersectional feminism. Intersectional feminism is just a better use of the creative arts, to literally let voiceless people, women's stories, children's stories to be coming out. And that for me is like the next best thing. And I suppose it ties in with my oral background and my oral lineage, but I really want to see that being played out in context. If people are in a context where the use of drums is a telling instrument, I want to see that more. And I think that the whole concept of feminism, gender development must be fun. And people have taken it out of that context and made it so theoretical and academic and sitting at a conference and deliberative and hard. And I almost want to see how these concepts practically can play out in life in a way where they are fun, they are natural, and they're suited to their environment without being too much. So I can't even prescribe what the creativity means, but I would like to see it going a little bit more in that direction. So there's a creativity aspect. And the last thing is that, which is always the usual, to always raise the views or the voices of those that live in the peripheries. So yeah, concretely, venture into newer domains, move a little bit more into the creative side of feminism and development, and also just to always remember that there are people in the peripheries and to always find them and bring them into the core.
That's really nice, Nompilo. I love the way you've described that because it sounds very freeing, actually. It sounds as though in the work that you're doing, you're trying not just to be inclusive in a checklisty kind of way, but you're actually genuinely trying to say to everyone who you're dealing with, come on, you all have a voice, you all have a right to speak. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm interested because you're going to tell me something that surprises me, and let's see what we can do with those surprises.
Absolutely. But I don't just want to be surprised. I want the world to be surprised. I feel that there's just so much of an idea of what gender work looks like in Africa. And we're just not getting a wide range of surprises. We're starting to get more or less the same type of narrative. We are seeking out the same narrative, and we're not freeing people to have different narratives. And I think different realities, they have to even be realities and identities that we cannot relate to. And if I can see people starting to move in that freedom and yet being part of the core, then yeah, I'm probably being ambitious, right?
No, I can imagine you'd make those things happen. Thank you very much for talking to me today, Nompilo. Thank you and goodbye for now.